Misogyny in the UK is proposed to be treated as an extremist view. Now keep in mind, this doesn't talk about, actually performing any actions, just the simple speech of it.
The UK government has announced plans to treat hatred of women as a form of extremism. A review of the UK's counter-extremism strategy has been ordered to determine how best to tackle this growing threat.
We know from various sociological studies that there's been a trend towards increased misogynistic beliefs amongst especially young people in Western countries.
But there's so many questions with this, isn't there? It's like, how do you define, what is extreme misogyny? I mean, if we're talking about actually assaulting and violence against women, we already have laws for that. It's like, I think the phrase she used was unpalatable beliefs or something or other. And it's like, well, what? How do you do? Are you now going to govern my thoughts?
Hello there, fellas. Today I bring you a video which is like very, very bad for men in general because they're bringing some kind of new law in UK, which is very bad. Let's see what we got today.
The UK government has announced plans to treat hatred of women as a form of extremism. A review of the UK's counter-extremism strategy has been ordered to determine how best to tackle this growing threat. Dr. Sarah Mega from the University of Melbourne researches the relationship between misogynistic beliefs and violent extremism. And she joins us now. Dr. Mega, thank you for your time. Now, you actually met with the UK's Home Office in June. What in particular did they want to ask about your research as they considered this move?
They were quite interested in exploring this link further and have been for a couple of years. We've been in consultations because of some high-profile events like the murder of Sarah Everard a few years ago in the UK, the recognition that a number of these violent extremist groups express quite hostile, misogynistic ideologies. I think perhaps isolating extreme misogyny as its own form of violent extremism, rather than understanding how it underpins and is causal of various forms of violent extremism, as our research finds, might be a bit problematic, because by segmenting it off as its own isolated form of ideology and maybe associated only with incel extremism, for example, this misses how a number of varieties of political ideology across the right-wing spectrum, Islamism, even amongst left-wing extremist groups, misogyny in our research was found to be a causal factor amongst all these forms.
And you had to separate the types of sexism when you undertook that research. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, we use this measure developed by psychologists and tested in a number of contexts around the world, called the ambivalent sexism inventory. We measure for what's called benevolent sexist attitudes, sort of belief that men and women are different but compatible, have separate spheres where they should be operating in, and women deserve protection. This is distinct from what's called hostile sexist attitudes, or what we use in our research as misogyny indicators, right? Belief that women are less valuable and don't deserve the same treatment as men. And those are the attitudes that we found to be quite significant in predicting an individual's support for various forms of violent extremism.
And is that worrying form of misogyny, particularly worrying, I should say, gaining traction? And what do we know about that in terms of the online space?
We know from various sociological studies that there's been a trend towards increased misogynistic beliefs amongst especially young people in Western countries. And our research here in Australia found that this is also consistent in the population survey we did, that young people were expressing quite worrying misogynistic attitudes and attitudes sympathetic of the legitimacy of using violence against women in order to, enforce these misogynistic ideals. And my interpretation of this is that it's very much influenced by these online forums where, we know the algorithms create this sort of echo chamber of views and a push towards more extreme and radical content. And so you have these influencers gaining enormous traction, like Andrew Tate, for example. And I think this is having a pretty extreme effect on our young people in Australia as well.
Wow, they just labeled men who dislike the way modern women are as extremists. And even if they are bringing such kind of law, why is there no equivalent from men's side, why is there no misandry law? For same result, they think that men just woke up and started to have this kind of mindset. No, it happened because of the women the way they are. And they're putting all the blame on these few individuals like Andrew Tate and all that. Yeah, they could be having some extreme mindset, but sometimes they have logical points of saying those things. But they're just using that as an example to label everyone having same kind of mindset, which is not true. We don't hate women, we just dislike what they have become and what they expect the man to do. And we are just not going to accept that. We'd rather stay alone and have our own peace. But even that is problematic for them because now we can't even have our own safe space where we can go on these forums like she mentioned and share our experience. And if the experience is not what they want to be, they just term it misogyny, because you're hating on women, even though the woman was the reason the man turned out the way he is.
And the extreme misogyny will now be lumped together under this, and you are meant to be reporting anyone that exhibits extreme misogynistic views. So that, in theory, if you've got a young lad in school and the teacher could hear him say something that sounds extremely misogynistic, reporting him to PREVENT, which is the anti-terrorist, stop people getting too radicalised in whatever area they're getting radicalised. But there's so many questions with this, isn't there? It's like, how do you define, what is extreme misogyny? I mean, if we're talking about sexually assaulting and violence against women, we already have laws for that. So what is extreme misogyny? No one, Yvette Cooper has come up with this, couldn't define it herself at the weekend. And where does it limit free speech? It's like, I think the phrase she used was unpalatable beliefs or something or other. And it's like, well, what? How do you do? Are you now going to govern my thoughts? You know, I might think something, I'm not going to act on it.
Yeah, but then how do you tackle the problem of this rise of this toxic masculinity, where we're seeing an increase in sexual assaults, more than 14 school-age girls saying that they've been touched when they haven't wanted to be, and the rise of the kind of awful rhetoric that these young boys are being indoctrinated in by the Tates of this world. What is the solution if it's not this?
Well, it's not an overnight solution for a start. I don't think it's an illegal law laid. I've once said before, and I got cancelled in an NHS contract because of it, that the challenge that we have today is what I call the defenestration of masculine power. And by that, what I mean is that young men growing up today have not had a masculine role model or enough masculine role models to show them right from wrong and how to constrain their power and to be polite to women. And maybe women don't want that anymore. I mean, maybe in this egalitarian society, we don't want men. The Jesuits, you said, the child is the father of the man. Give me the child and I'll give you the man. And the idea was that you needed to train that young kid in the way he should go. I'm talking about the masculine now. And so if you don't have masculine authority, showing that guy, we often go, I'm a bloke, look how I treat my wife and my sister. If they don't learn it from that, then when they get to 14, 24 and they get their masculine power, they don't know how to constrain themselves.
And then they've got the likes of Andrew Tate.
They just go on and on about this nonsense without tackling actual issues, why this is, I think, another version of just Me Too. It's going to alienate men more. They think this is going to solve anything. This is not going to solve anything. It's only going to further decrease the involvement the men would have with the woman, because anything would land them in jail. And why would a man take that risk? This is so stupid. I don't know what the government in UK is doing, but this is just like, I don't even have the words to describe this. And the guy was trying so hard not to get cancelled. He was also not making any sense. So let's just see comments and if we can find what men are saying about this. Doesn't this instantly make all Muslims extremists? Because that's what their ideology is. But they cannot say that because, of course, it could be called you as some kind of racist or whatever. treating women with respect, it goes both ways. The way some women speak to and treat men these days are disgusting. Of course, they cannot see. All of a sudden, crime against men is normal, like who cares? Crime against women, yeah, that's the real issue. Misogyny is classed as extremism. Which group oppresses the woman again? I need reminding. See, everyone knows what's happening, but there's government who are like hungry for votes. Of course, they're doing this for votes. Why else would they do that? If a woman accuses you of misogyny, screaming high-pitched voice, how dare you, I'm a woman, identify as a woman, and then walk off, how can they challenge you? It's absurd. They can label you whatever they want, man. I just hope someone stand up to this and doesn't make this law a reality, because it could be a really bad one. Let's see some TikTok for this.
Misogyny in the UK is proposed to be treated as an extremist view. Now keep in mind, this doesn't talk about, actually performing any actions, just the simple speech of it. Now, as repulsive as I may find many political views, what happened to the freedom of speech? Everybody's talking about Russia, but the UK really seems to be slipping down a deep, dark hole where people are getting arrested at far higher rates than in Russia. I mean, if you compare the number of social media arrests for just posting simple comments in the UK versus Russia, and mind you, Russia has more than twice the population of the UK, you'll find way more people are getting arrested in the UK for simply saying things on social media versus people in Russia.
Extreme misogyny could soon become a form of terrorism in the UK. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, has announced a review into the Terrorism Act, saying that it's essentially 9 years out of date and needs to better reflect changing ideologies and forms of hatred, which will include things like far-right extremism, Islamic extremism, as well as also extreme misogyny. Now, we don't yet know the specifics of that, but it will look at kind of how the law should better reflect these changing ideologies, which are a threat to society, and thereby the definition of terrorism is kind of activities which are kind of a danger to society, as well as also the review will also look at how they're spreading, essentially, particularly with online platforms, social media. Ideologies are spreading in a very different way than they were a decade ago. I think most people that use platforms like TikTok will have seen many cases of extreme misogyny and how quickly they're being spread. People like Andrew Tate, who are making a platform out.
This is crazy, man. I just hope if someone is watching this from UK, the men watching from UK, stand up to this, because men normally don't like to go and protest and all that stuff unless it's too very extreme, and this counts as that extreme. Be able to stand up for ourselves. They do not have any proper term to define this. Anything can be misogyny in eyes of women, and you'll be in jail. Now, this is happening in UK, then the feminists will want this in US, and then the other part of the world, and everywhere the men would be fucked. As simple as that. And we won't even have any safe space to talk about and share our opinions, because they would ban everything with that kind of term. But misandry, hate against men, that would be completely fine. Even on like those Instagram comments, you can say things bad about men, but you say bad about women, just replacing the word man with woman, your comment will be turned off and reported, something like that. So that's how messed up the world is against men, and how unfair it is. But anyways, man, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed, like, share, subscribe. Let other men know of this situation. Here are some more videos you can watch. You can support the channel with super chat or whatever you want. But that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next one.